Ya está. Bueno, muy buenas tardes.
Good afternoon. Thank you to all of you who are present here and all of those who are also connected online on behalf of the Ministry for Innovation and Technology. And now I'm able to speak to a theme that I'm really passionate about. It's the scientometric analysis of the state of scientific publications in Latin America and how fundamental this is to really highlight the impact of what's going on in Latin America in this field across the world. Now, first of all, I'm going to speak about the scientific collaborations, the national and the global context next, and then the importance of teacher research on teaching. We're going to be looking at this at the national level and at the international level, and then we're going to be seeing how all of this investigation can have a very positive impact on teaching, which is one of the fundamental functions, of course, in higher education. Universities need to have teachers, otherwise they would simply be research centres. So now we're going to look at why we carry out research in order to improve teaching in universities. Now, first of all, when it comes to review of the situation at an international level, scientific cooperation happens between sociology and sciences. Now, social sciences are a relationship between, of course, people. And we also have a branch that is dedicated to going further than sociology, involving human interactions. And this is where we get to scientometric. This dates back to the 70s, and in Hungary, there was this publication, Scientometric 15, which proposed putting forward publications and quotations and speaking about some of the most relevant magazines. And it was in 1977 that there was this idea to look at this as a quantitative calculation, the relationships between human beings, but they wanted to have some quantitative analysis behind all of this. And so these were the results of this scientific partnership. So it's absolutely fundamental that we see that there is cooperation between human beings in order to give us some concrete results. Now, secondly, there are many issues that we need to resolve at an international level, and research is there to try and overcome some of these issues. And one of the big challenges is to work in a multidisciplinary way to solve these issues. And in order to work together between different disciplines, there needs to be cooperation. Therefore, it's absolutely fundamental in order to solve problems, not only the scientific publications, but afterwards being able to apply the scientific research to the real world. So this is a big challenge, working in a multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary way, but also at an international level. Not only between different countries, between different countries, and this is why there needs to be an exchange of information. We are seeing more and more postdoctoral relationships between different countries, and governments are actually often at the heart of this. Colombia has actually supported 800 postdoctoral studies. And it's this whole process of research that is then taken to or shared with another country. That's why we need to make sure that there are public policies that promote these exchanges between researchers. So researchers can go to other countries and research and welcome researchers into their own countries, so there is cooperation. It's all about making sure that people know each other. For example, in a event like today's, and I'd like to thank UNESCO for the event that has been set up today, because this is a space of exchange. And that's where the meetings of great minds can happen, and that can generate new processes. There also needs to be a process of development, and this is where international cooperation can help with the quality and visibility of research. It's here where institutions such as UNESCO, which, or for example, ASCUN and other types of organizations that are knowledge-based organizations and that focus on research, do this work in terms of research development. And we need to make sure that the contacts that are made don't disappear, and that we can continue to have meetings where people can come together and exchange ideas, moving forward to developing different processes. And finally, an important point is affinity. Before being a minister, I was a vice-chancellor of a university, and it's very difficult because sometimes if you're speaking to a Brazilian expert in their field, a researcher, and there's a and you want them to meet with a Mexican, then, well, that's great. You can bring them together in an important event. But if there's no affinity, then that's going to be very difficult. Here in Barcelona, for example, maybe they might actually meet up, and there might actually be that affinity, that click, that spark. So this goes beyond language, let's say. We know that language barriers, are perhaps less important here because English seems to be the dominant language in research. But sometimes it's not easy to set up these types of partnerships. We also have to look at the organizations and the institutions that are set up to try and create these links between researchers. So there can be spaces for publications, publishing houses, and magazines, etc. All of this is about visibility between different scientists and researchers. There can be a lot of partnerships, but if we don't have something concrete and tangible at the end, and this is through papers and scientific articles, then this work will never get out there. So that the first sample, the first roots of this collaboration needs to be through something material, or needs to result in something material. That's why we need to render research attractive, and that's where trust comes in. Doctor, you are here from the National University of Colombia. It's a pleasure to have you with us. So, entering into a network of cooperation, that means that you need to make the project attractive. Sometimes it might be difficult if your city isn't one that is necessarily an attractive one that has that much to offer. This is where we need to do work. So, as a researcher, how are we able to achieve some small steps and move forward so that others will start to pay attention to what you're doing? And if you're inside these different kinds of international organizations, that's where the attractivity can come from. Being cited, quoted more times, getting more exposure, etc. We also have to look at the public policies and the kind of incentives that are offered to researchers in each country, so that there can be partnership and collaboration. If you're publishing with somebody abroad, how is this going to be rolled out, or how is this going to lead to certain kinds of bonuses or incentives for this work to be carried further? This is something that we see in Latin America. There are different types of incentives. It's very varied. In Colombia, we are trying to come up with a special status for researchers, always thinking about public research centres. But even when it comes to the universities themselves, we need to make sure that there are incentives that will encourage people to actually engage in dialogue with others and partnerships. And therefore we can give more visibility to publications. If you only publish with people from the same country or the same university or the same city, then you're limiting the impact that your work can have. And the impact of an article is really measured in the number of times that article is cited elsewhere. So partnerships are important. And this is a very technical issue as well, speaking about the editorial side of things, but there does need to be some kinds of support, technical assistance. If there can be support for researchers, then this is something that's going to be much more attractive also when it comes to encouraging students to study in a particular domain. So we have to look for ways of creating affinities between different researchers, I've already said. And we need to make sure that we have doctoral and post-doctoral spaces that are multidisciplinary, so that there can be opportunities for collaboration and for partnerships. And this goes hand in hand with the recommendations of the OECD. For example, for a country like Colombia, increasing investment in research and technology. In Colombia, for the first time ever, we are going to be investing more than 1% of our GDP in research. So before that, we were in 0.6%. Before that, 0.2% the year before. Currently, we're at 0.8%, around there. And next year, we will surpass 1% of GDP focused on research. And if we compare that to other countries at an international level, then that's still rather low. However, this is a big step for our country. It's also important to use diplomatic channels so that we can also promote science. This is something that we are going to do through creating a scientific aggregate, let's say, a scientific reference person within the different diplomatic channels that we have. And this is a person who will be able to create networks at the doctoral, postdoctoral level. Can also be somebody who can negotiate in terms of creating grants and scholarships, for example, with the United States. So these are people who are going to be dedicated to diplomatic measures that can support science. It's also about making sure that researchers have the resources to be able to carry out their work. We also need to go towards a kind of internationalization of these processes, and this needs to be a priority. However, we know that it needs to be a priority beyond national cooperation, because we know that, as I said before, this will make us more attractive if we have these international links. It will be easier to get financing if our research projects are attractive. And finally, it's about creating public policies that favour research. And all of this is based on the OECD recommendations that I've just presented to you, so that we can generate a lot more cooperation. So now let's move on. And we're going to have some figures about the national and international situation. Here you can see on the screen. I hope you can see the information on the screen clearly on this graph. You can see the impact of a research paper based on the number of times it's been cited. It's not the same thing having a publication in Nature or Science as it is in a magazine or a publication that isn't that well known. So here we can see the number of citations in the world. We said there were countries like United States that have a level of publications that is above the average. And in orange, you can see the impact of the lead researcher. There's always a lead researcher. And here we can see the impact of that lead researcher. So we can see here, with the United States above the average, that means that other countries are going to want to work with that lead researcher. Now, here we can see that in terms of the number of times that research papers are cited, we can see that Latin America is above the average. However, its lead researchers are not as appreciated. Here we can see that Canada is still in a good position, second in line to the United States. But, for example, Brazil is really lagging behind here. Now, there is often a lot of collaboration between Brazilian researchers, but not outside of Brazil. Colombia, we're at 0.9. We've almost reached the world average. And we want to reach 1.9. That's our objective. And we want to be the country that has the most number of research papers that are cited, that are quoted in Latin America. Here, we can also see, in general, that Latin America is below the average when it comes to the number of times our papers are quoted. So we're not that visible on the global scene. So that's why I'm saying that we have to try and increase our level of cooperation with other countries so that we can become more visible. Here, we can see the production capacity when it comes to research papers, and we can see that we get the countries that generate most research papers are Mexico, then Argentina, Chile, Peru, Ecuador. But we can also see the amount of international cooperation, because Brazil is not that well placed there. And here we can see that the United States creates more research papers than anyone else. And they also have a lot of cooperation internationally. And they are the ones that other countries want to work. They are the countries that other countries want to work with. And here we see other countries with lots of collaboration within their countries, but not outside. In Colombia, we have a much better level of production of these types of research papers than many other countries in Latin America, but we're still below the world average. And now we're going to look at the evolution of the production of scientific papers in the last 5 years. Here we can see that Brazil is in first place, and Mexico, Chile, Colombia is the green one here that you can see here that's kind of almost merged here with the orange one. And we have a few more papers that say in Argentina, making us number 4 in Latin America. We have been continuing to produce research papers despite the pandemic, and other countries have a similar rate or are developing at a similar rate when it comes to producing scientific papers. And it's maybe because, I don't know, maybe the pandemic didn't affect this production too much because people were stuck at home. So what else did they have to do? They could get on with their research. And, of course, video conferencing meant that there could still be contact between researchers. So here we can see the production in each country and it's the impact that the quotes can having on countries. We see Chile, Brazil and Mexico, and they don't have too much of an impact when it comes to the quotations or being cited, because these are countries that tend to only have national cooperation. And there's a lot of cooperation between between different researchers, and often not in English, and that can actually reduce, as I already said, the visibility of these countries. There is only one country that is above the world average, and that's the case of Chile. And here we see in the orange line is the world average. And here we can see how international cooperation can have a positive impact on countries. We know that national cooperation can have a positive impact. However, if there's no international cooperation, that impact will only be very limited. So we can see that there are different combinations between different countries. And when that happens, it's going to be more visible. Those countries are going to be more visible at the international level, and that's going to help them to get more resources at an international level, so that research can continue to be carried out. There are some people who are for, some people who are against these types of measures for seeing the impact of research, but it's true that we do give an idea of how attractive a lead researcher is, or how attractive a research paper is. And this is the situation in Colombia compared with the rest of the world. In Colombia, just like in all of the countries in the world, the majority of research is carried out in the field of medicine, especially in this post-pandemic world. But it's always been medicine that has really been the leader, what's been pushing research. And it's something that we all depend on in our countries. And in Colombia, that's also the case. And we can see here, this is Colombia. It's in the area of medicine. Now, believe it or not, social sciences, where we have economics, for example, because here we're speaking about the economics and businesses, it's much lower. There's a disproportionate relationship between the two. Of the 7 magazines or reviews that we have in Colombia, the majority of them are social science reviews. So we can see that we have a lot more in Colombia, in fact. We're actually above the world average when it comes to social science studies and research, which is normally much lower. So we can see that social sciences is really where we publish quite a lot. And some people might believe that, we have all this research in social sciences, but it's not being published anywhere. Well, here you can see that's the exact opposite. So this is really one of our strengths compared to other countries in the world. And here you can see that the country with which Colombia has the closest links is United States. We have over 11,000 papers, and in the last 4 years, 5,000 papers have been produced with the United States, but we also have a lot of cooperation with Spain as well. Now, traditionally, of course, the United States has always been our biggest trading partner, and Spain's always been our biggest, let's say, cultural partner. So that shows why they are perhaps our two biggest partners in research. And it's also where the largest number of Colombians study outside of Colombia in tertiary education. How we can see that China also has a big impact, and that's even higher than United States. We also have Germany and Italy, where there's less production of publications or of research papers, but they perhaps have more of an impact. But we can see that Colombia's main partners are United States and Spain. There's about 14 to 30 quotations per article with this kind of international cooperation. Now we see that the National Centre for Research in France is an institution that has a very high level, a very high impact when it comes to the number of times research is quoted. And these institutions that you see here on the screen at the top are absolutely key when it comes to our continued collaboration. And the High Energy Physics Institute is of particular note in this area.
Incentivar, hicimos dos convocatorias.
Now, with a view to promoting our work, we have made an appeal for support for Colombian periodicals, 40 of them to be put on the COPRO index, and we're working with a Dutch institute to achieve that, and also doing what we can to make sure that more scientific articles are published. We have an objective of publishing 2,000 scientific articles with resources available for translation, for stylistic improvements, for covering publishing charges. We know that there is this major trend now. More and more things are being published in open access, but that has a cost for the researchers and the universities. They have to pay from $300 to $11,000 to have an open access publication. And so we have a policy to support those researchers in order that they be able to fund that open access to make sure that knowledge is available to all. And I think that that is a significant theme on the agenda. We signed an agreement in Paris, in UNESCO, last November. We signed an open access agreement, and we are working more and more on this issue of public access. And this research, these publications are supported by public funds. And the researchers say, okay, we'll publish in open access, but then please cover the publishing charges. So that is something that we are striving to do now. Sometimes we're told that there are certain periodicals, certain publications that don't have many citations. They are publishing things of lesser quality, so they should be removed from the system. But of the periodicals that are financed this way, over 90% are of high quality, and one can put one's trust in them. Here are some of the recommendations. In order to promote scientific exchange, we have to continue to interact, to travel. Human resources need to be made available for that purpose. I travel all around the world, and we're all told all the time about brain drain. There are some researchers from outside Colombia who cooperate more with Colombian researchers than Colombian researchers within. So the fact that someone has left a country doesn't mean that it's really a brain drain, because I met Professor Wisconsin, who has set up a vaccination development company, the first one to produce vaccines in 20 years in Colombia. He comes back to Colombia all the time, so this is not a brain who has left completely. We can't force him to come back to Colombia. He wants to work in the best laboratories in the world to develop his knowledge, his scientific knowledge, but we want to make sure that the mechanisms for knowledge transfer with the country remain in place. Promoting scientific research alliances, not just with universities, but with research center. We've signed an agreement with an institute in England that is leading in the world. It cooperates with the NIH. We have an agreement with NIH in the United States. And so we have to find these partners. We need also to encourage international cooperation, promote experimentation in laboratories, and have a real infrastructure and leadership infrastructure in open science. UNESCO is a real pioneer in this field of open science, and we really must make sure that all periodicals are accessible to all, that all data published can be seen by anyone. So just by way of conclusion, what's the objective, really, of all of this? If a researcher wants to be visible, to be attractive for other researchers, well, then that will also attract funding. Having funding, one can give scholarships to others. If I publish more, I'm more attractive, I have a better H-index, and I attract resources that can be used to finance projects and to train students. So there are huge advantages to being more visible and more attractive to others in the scientific community through publication and through citation. And when one talks about external resources, research can attract investment in universities. So you really need to be attractive and visible and to have a high level of cooperation in order to be able to profit from different sources of funding. Now, of course, education in laboratories is very expensive. And so it's important to have experiments carried out in the field and access to resources because you're attractive nationally or internationally. Well, that also means that you can offer more to one's students. And that is also true for the publication of results. Through that, students can themselves become publishers. They can publish their articles. Therefore, they generate or improve their own level of knowledge. They train themselves, and they become researchers who can attract further resources. In all of this, everything that is theoretical needs subsequently to be transformed into applied research results that generate products and services that in the longer term lead to marketable innovation. So basic science, applied science, but it all has to start with the basic science. And when it comes to the organization of the various scientific inputs, it's very important that students have in mind the fact that research is at the heart of university work, and a student who is well trained in the scientific method he can tackle any kind of problem. I mean, he is trained in problem resolution. So we need to inculcate scientific curiosity and research abilities in our students. And when they go out on the market, the employment market, even if they're not scientific researchers, even if they're working for some company, through their ability to do documentary research, I mean, if the company is confronted with a problem, the well-trained student will find a solution quickly by comparing what other companies are doing, what is available in the literature, and so on. It is important, then, that students have that pioneering research mentality, and they have it in mind that there's probably someone else in the world who is confronted with the same problem. So it's a question of looking through the databases, not just Google. I mean, the research papers available in different databases with a view to finding the right solution. So the message with which I would conclude is the following. First of all, we need to strengthen cooperation networks. I've talked about the various strategies that can be put in place to have a better level of publication and a better level of citation, to make one's research more attractive, and to have, therefore, access to external resources, to funding by foundations, by governments. In the United States, there's a philanthropist who gave $1.1 billion of funds for research on biodiversity. And so in our universities, there are many donations of that kind, and to be competitive, you have to be able to differentiate oneself from what others are doing. So if we have a university model where the teaching is based on research, you can gain access to all of these advantages and end up with better researchers in the medium and the long term, and therefore achieve the objectives of sustainable development that we all want to achieve. Thank you for your attention.
No sé si hay espacio para preguntas.
Well, I don't know if there are any other questions. Any questions following my talk? Questions or comments? Dr. Dali?
Microphone, please.
Sí, qué bueno.
Nunca alcanzamos.
Yeah, well, we never grow tired of hearing from you, but my question
Nosotros tenemos
is that we have to inform citizens about innovation and research and technological development. But I believe that when it comes to social sciences, and that's why so many papers in Colombia are social sciences papers, is because we have a real culture when it comes to all of these types of areas in which life has been so difficult for us, let's say. But when it comes to technology, we have a huge problem, and that is the jump from laboratories into industries. That's our main issue, because we cannot mobilize this knowledge for the production, for production purposes, and we can actually see this when you see the number of PhDs in this particular field. When it comes to industry, there are not many people with PhDs actually going into that particular field. So we know that there is the national and regional market is affected by these issues, and we really need to make perhaps partner up with the United States so we can make some progress in this area. But it's going to take us maybe 20 years to make up the lost ground, because we just don't have the people that we need with the qualifications and knowledge that we need. And it took us 3 years to actually even convince the industries with the very first projects that we had with them that this wasn't just a leap into the unknown for them. And so we really want to do things well. That's something that we're passionate about. However, we are missing that other link in the chain. And I believe that it's also something that's been done in Argentina. If they have been able to make that jump from the laboratory to industry. Well, yes, that's true. And it's true that we do not have many doctors in the industry. Now, we see that the largest investment in research and development in Argentina is in industry. That's not the same in Colombia. We need to make sure that we are researching in R&D in industry, and we need to make sure that there is a public policy in particular for that. And so yes, we need to make sure that that doctors can actually carry out internships and carry out projects with the industry. But yes, this is something that we really want to push. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm Christoph Hansert. I'm from the German Research Exchange Institute, and we have many partnerships in Colombia. However, when it comes to your presentation, I have a question, and it's something that we're focusing on in Germany at the moment. To carry out research that has a real impact on society and to solve real problems, often we need 2 disciplines or more. Young researchers, when they're in their postdoctoral phase, only have 3 years, and it's only enough for them to become doctors in one discipline. They need to be able to have knowledge of another discipline, but this needs to be at a really extremely high level of excellence. And these discussions are beginning in Germany right now. We need research that is cross-disciplinary. I don't know if there's this same discussion in Colombia. Well, thank you very much. And that was excellent Spanish that you spoke there. Yes, we are also speaking about this. When it comes to socio-economic issues, they're often interdisciplinary, and therefore we are creating more and more doctorates that are, let's say, multidisciplinary or in other areas that were not covered previously. And it's also a little bit about open sciences. In open sciences, we know that that's something that was pushed particularly in Germany, so that science isn't just in research papers and between researchers. Just not going to be put away in a cupboard somewhere so no one reads them. But we need to make sure that all of these papers can be dedicated to, for example, technological development, and that they are not just purely scientific papers. That's why we speak about science, technology, and innovation in my ministry, so that we can look at all of these issues together. And that's going to help us to innovate through science.
Bien, gracias por la charla.
Well, thank you very much, Minister. I believe it's very interesting what you're saying. I'm from Uruguay, from a technological university, public university. And one of the big problems that we have in the region in Latin America is that when it comes to being a researcher in Argentina, I remember this many years ago, it's not easy if you're a national researcher. And often innovators are left by the wayside, because if you want to be a researcher, then that's great. You can go ahead and do your research. But of course, if you're an innovator, then you don't have a research paper. You simply solve a problem. For example, you can turn a company into a unicorn company in only 3 years. But right now, what I believe, and fundamentally in the area of technology, of course, you need more than one discipline. It's like in COVID. That was very, very clear with COVID. It was very, very clear that in 4 months' time, we had vaccines. 6 months later, they're rolling them out around the world, and then everybody had to be online. So the technological solutions were there, but all of these issues, all of these solutions were found through multidisciplinary efforts. We need to look further. Well, thank you. Yes, regarding the social function of science now, when it comes to transforming different communities and territories. How can science play a social role? And when it comes to different references or in different self or governing regions of our countries, how can science really have an impact? Yes, Doctor, go ahead. We are training young people who live in the border regions and coming back to the border regions, and now they are part of the social fabric. They are developing the social fabric in these areas. They've created 15 cooperative companies, and they've done this in their own regions. I wanted to tell you this anecdote because I think it's a good example of what can be done. Well, yes, thank you very much. I would like to thank the Minister on behalf of UNESCO. It was very, very interesting. There were 8,000 people who were following online. And I just wanted to thank you very much for everything you said. So thank you to everyone as well who has participated in this very interesting session. Thank you.